Woke means having a critical consciousness, having been awakened to a new way of seeing the world in terms of structural power and how it operates and how it harms people, etc.
So that's interesting, because it actually means when the left says that those on the right who use the word woke to describe leftist behavior, and sure, it is as a pejorative, right? Of course it is, but it's also just a descriptor. If it's a negative descriptor, it's more a commentary on the behavior of the left than the intent of the person on the right wing who's using it. It's really exposing the fact that they're not advocating for racial equality, they're not advocating for justice, that they're advocating for a Marxist ideology. And that's their way of telling us. I personally like when they show their true colors, because it's a lot more powerful coming from the actual activists themselves, letting us know, like Patrisse Cullors did and Alicia Garza did at the head of Black Lives Matter, when they were like, oh, we're trained Marxists. Well, then I didn't have to sit here and you didn't have to sit there and say, listen, these people are neo-Marxists. They're pushing actual communism on us. Nope. Black Lives Matter people said it themselves. You don't have to take our word for it. That's what you hear when you hear the left say using the word woke in a pejorative way means anti-Black.
Yeah, I mean, so what people need to understand, a very simple rule of thumb that you need to understand is that in general, Marxists use the same vocabulary you do, but they use a different dictionary. In other words, they are using terms to have specialist meanings, just like in science. If we use a term in a scientific sense, sometimes has a very specialist meaning and it can't mean other things. They're using terms in a specialist sense, but rather than using everyday words, or rather than using scientific terms, they're using everyday words with a specialist meaning. So you think anti-Black means against Black people, and then you get defensive, and they can convince people that you might be a racist, but they mean anti-capital B Black, where capital B Black means having awakened a critical consciousness of what it means to be Black under critical race theory in America and engaging in neo-Marxist activism as a result. And so they aren't lying, they're intentionally misusing words. And I said intentionally just now, that's actually not even totally fair, because I think after a while, if you swim in this kind of cult water long enough, you adopt that mentality and you actually start to think that's what the words really mean. That's how they present this. I first got into this arguing with gender studies and feminists who were saying that sexism is systemic. And I said, well, why didn't you call it systemic sexism when you mean systemic sexism and leave other sexism out? And they said, because all sexism is systemic. So they absorbed the whole meaning of the term. So they're actually using these terms to mean something different than what people think they mean. And then they can play these rhetorical games and come back when you criticize their stuff. They can say that this is a code or a dog whistle for being anti-Black. They can be not lying because of what they mean by the word Black. It means that, like, Larry Elder wasn't authentically Black, right? He's a white face of black face of white supremacy. Dave Chappelle isn't Black. He made jokes from white privilege. We can go down the list of all of the not Black people because they don't have the right attitudes, because they're conservatives, or because they made fun of some woke initiative or whatever. And what it means then when you're being Black is, for them with the capital B, as we all often see now, is that you have adopted a critical consciousness. Now, unfortunately, lots of people who participate in this don't know this. And so you'll have a lot of Black people seeking identity in the capital B Black, and they end up in this kind of murky zone where they're kind of doing some of it and they aren't doing some of it, because the activists are using the word intentionally in an ambiguous way to manipulate circumstances and people and institutions, and they're very successful at it.